Well, speaking of the national wins and more, keeping an eye on inflation. And look, it's always better to try and connect it to something that everybody's going to experience in their daily life. So let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. July 4th barbecue season is here. People are getting ready. And the inflation index on this, we did this in Thanksgiving, and I remember being shocked at the numbers then. Now we're talking about July 4th. Well, the price, it will be up as much as 36%. It is led by beef, but grocery costs for the Independence Day party are rising the most since the Farm Bureau began even tracking all of the data. So ground beef prices are up 36%. Chicken breast has actually also gone up by an entire third. People can expect to spend 17% more on food across the board for the barbecue, the biggest increase since people began tracking. And in 2021, the cost of the Independence Day cookout actually declined by about 1%. But since then, obviously things have skyrocketed. They can't blame this one on Putin. And when you look at it, it really is insane. So ground beef, chicken, both above 30. Pork and beans also up at 33%. Center cut pork chops, 31%. Fresh squeezed lemonade, 22%. How is lemonade up 20%? What's happening? Potato salad, 20%. Hamburger buns, 16%. Vanilla ice cream, 10%. 13-ounce bag of chocolate chip cookies, 7%. Strawberries are down 16. Wow, I feel bad for the strawberry farmers. I don't know what's going on there. Sliced cheese is actually down 13. I guess it's a good thing, depending on what type of cheese that you're buying. And potato chips are relatively flat. So not sure what's going on in the lemonade markets. I should do a deep dive into exactly what's going on there. But I do think that just focusing on the most basic areas of life where stuff is getting more expensive is something that our government lacks. And you and I have noticed with great interest, our airline segments are doing phenomenally. And I was like, why? Like, why are people so interested? Anytime I see something unexpected pop, I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And I think it's because a lot of people are flying. Yesterday was a TSA record over the last 2 years. And like, hey, this shit is crazy. This is crazy. The stuff is canceled all the time. I saw a story of a guy who was connecting via Europe. Air Canada just canceled his connection. They said, oh, you have another flight 2 days from now. And they're not taking phone, and there's a 3-hour line at the airport. That's nuts. I mean, in terms of the disruption to daily life, people are going to visit their parents, people are flying internationally, people are finally going on vacation for the first time. It's a total disaster. Lots of reports about honeymoon couples who had booked travel and they're losing 1, 2, 3 whole days in order to travel. Nightmares. This is not a well-ordered society. And another area where I'm looking at this is cars. Let's throw this up there on the screen. The cost to finance a new car right now is at $600 a month. And auto shoppers are actually going to have to pay even more because of the Federal Reserve rate hike. So new car prices not only are up 13% and used car up 16%, according to the latest data, but the 0.75% basis pump, the 75 basis point bump is actually going to increase the average auto loan to 5% over 70 months, meaning that just for a basic average car, you're paying $650 per month. Then you consider gas. I've already run the numbers on that. Depending on where you live, it's anywhere between $250 to $300 a month. So now you're looking at $1,000. If you consider insurance, depending on the type of car, and more, let's call it $200 maybe, on average, depending on who you are, family, all of it. If you have a family, you're especially a host. But if you're a single person, now we're talking about $1,200, $1,500 just for a basic brand new car, or even for a used car. That's a lot of money.
The used car numbers are not much lower. $546 for used cars versus $656 for new cars.
Since when has that ever happened in history? In terms of the used car, I tell you, look, my Jeep just got into an accident, and they're like, oh yeah, it's going to take a long time in order to try and fix this. There's no parts for all of this. The bills are astronomical. Luckily, insurance is covering it because some lady came and hit the Jeep. But look, it's difficult for people who are out there. Not everybody can afford it. Also, just try going without a car for an entire month while you're waiting for it to get fixed in the shop.
Yeah, impossible, especially given the status of public transit in almost all of the country. New York is the only exception. I think it's really important to underscore with regards to the cost of financing a vehicle. This is the intent, the explicit intent of the Fed lifting rates. This is what they want. This is their goal. And again, I mean, we've discussed this, but it's so important to underscore that because our political system has failed and is unable to deal with some of the other underlying issues, the supply chain issues, because, you know, Biden's committed to keeping the war in Ukraine going forever, it all falls to the Fed. And what the Fed can do and what they're being pushed to do by Biden and by Republicans have the same desires is to make it much more difficult for you to do things like buy a car, buy a house, to hit your bank account, okay? To lower your wages. I mean, they explicitly said this, to lower your wages and to hike unemployment. We did that segment about how Larry Summers is saying we need 10% unemployment for a year. 10%! Casually. Like
That's more than triple what it is.
Like you're not talking about millions of people's lives and livelihoods. And as you always rightly point out, people will literally die because of that pain and depression from losing their livelihood. This is the sign that, you know, the policy that they are trying to implement here, the goal of it, which is to hurt you, is working. And the really scary thing, though, is that it may not even work to get inflation under control because, as I just said, there are a lot of other factors that are going in. And in fact, you know, the stimulus that was given to the American people, which, as I pointed out to Bill Maher, was much less than what was given to Wall Street and corporate America, but the stimulus that was given to working class people, that's mostly burned off. I mean, we haven't had a new stimulus program in, 15 months? It's been a long time. People's bank accounts are down. Credit card debt is as high as it has ever been in history. So we are now dealing with a problem that doesn't exist. And the other things that are festering that are keeping inflation high, we're doing nothing about. Look, again, to go back to Democratic impotence here. Yes, in certain ways, they have political constraints. There's no doubt about it. But just take the example of after the stock market crash in 1929, Congress held a series of hearings called the Pecora hearings, where they investigated Wall Street to see how the hell this happened. And lo and behold, it wasn't just, the all-knowing market and it had a hiccup, whatever. There were wrongdoers there who were intentionally fleecing regular people, getting them into the stock market. They introduced, you can buy this on margin. Just outright fleecing consumers, lying to them about what the risks were, and then betting on the other side. Is exactly the same thing that happened in the housing financial and in the crash there as well, where they knew these were bad investments. They're betting on the other side of it and screwing over the very customers that they claim to be serving. This all came out in the Pecora hearings. Guess what? Politics isn't static. When the public learned the way that they had been screwed over, there was a massive outcry for financial regulation. And some of the bedrock financial regulation that made banking a relatively safe and stable and boring enterprise for a lot of years, for decades, until basically the Clintons came along, was implemented during that time because there was something exposed that was so deeply shocking and outrageous to the public that they would not let the politicians stand by and do nothing. Where is that energy now? Where's that energy now to do something about this? So even if you don't have the votes right at this second, that doesn't mean that you cannot do anything, that you're completely helpless, that you can't move things forward. And especially, listen, the power of the bully pulpit is very powerful. If you call these, corporate CEOs who are intentionally hiking up their prices because they can, because they're monopolists, you haul them before Congress, you call them to account, that in and of itself cools things down in terms of corporations jacking up prices because they don't want to be the next one that is the subject of a public ire.
Yeah, nearly 1/3 of inflation is actually expectations. So being able, in order to set expectations in a different direction by the government, either talking specifically about what they're going to do or calling people out or even looking at ways in order to ease supply. I mean, I think it's telling that it took children starving from lack of baby formula for the government to invoke the BPA.
That's right.
And that took months.
Right.
But look, it's not as dire, but it's still bad when people can barely afford to live and to work. I mean, I'm looking at an article that just came out this morning about all of the macro data tells us that people are cutting back significantly on quality of life expenses. They're pulling their kids out of summer camps or not pursuing activities that are extracurriculars for their children, driving less, cutting off of any sort of cutting down any sort of vacation that had already been planned, eating out less. Look, you don't have a right to eat out, but you know, it's nice. So for people, it eases the burden sometimes whenever you want to. Sometimes it's fun in order to change things up on a Saturday. So those are the first things in order to go for a lot of people. And the cost of eggs, you know, even is up 75% in a year. That's crazy. You consider all of these price increases on the aggregate, and at the end of the day, when you're looking at your credit card bill, you know, another thing I was going to tell people, go and look at some of your old Amazon purchases or past purchases from like 5 years ago on basics like paper towels, and you'll be shocked at how much more you're paying. And it's like people can see that, they feel it viscerally. That is, if Biden, I would be talking about gas and cars and food every single day. That's all I would spend my time on. And yet, I mean, I'm doing a whole monologue on this. They're proposing yet another inflationary move in order to stick it to Russia, which is probably not even going to work. I can't get my minds around these politicians. I don't know what they do all day.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Yeah, and they have the American people ready to hear this message.
Yes.
About, you know, about Wall Street speculation, about corporate America,
anything.
Greed, and it's not the whole picture, but it's a part of the picture. So tell that story, call them to account, do something instead of just saying, what can we do? The baby formula thing is interesting because, you know, up to a point, they were dragging their, there's not much we can do and blah, blah, blah. And then once it got to a point, guess what? They figured out how to do something. Yep. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, you do almost love to see it.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.